Rice, the most widely consumed food on the planet. And more than likely, everyone watching this video is going to be putting rice away for long-term storage. What is the best way to store your rice long-term? Hello, my name is Les, and I want to welcome you to the Chef Prepper channel. And in this video, we're going to look at many different ways to store rice for the long term, so that when the time comes that you need it, it's there and ready to go. And at the end of the video, I'll show you my favorite way, as of now, to store rice. There are two main types of rice, brown rice and white rice. You would store them both the same way. The white rice is going to keep much longer than the brown rice. But if you have brown rice, it's still a good idea to repackage it. What are the enemies of food storage? One is moisture. So your containers, buckets, jars, plastic jugs, Mylar bags, they got to be dry. The food you put in them has to be dry. If you got all that accomplished, then you have overcame the moisture problem. Another enemy of food for the long term is light. We've all seen things that were bought new, set outside in the sunlight for a long time, and you can see a big difference. That's the deterioration that light can cause. So, the package you put your rice in doesn't have to block out the light in and of itself, but if it doesn't, like this, you need to put this into something like that or something similar that will block out the light. If you can do that, mission accomplished as far as the light goes. The next enemy of your food in storage is oxygen. So we have two primary ways to deal with that. One is oxygen absorbers. And it's important to remember that if you use these, they remove the oxygen, not all the air. So sometimes when you use these in a Mylar bag, the bag will draw up really tight, sometimes it won't. But just keep in mind, these only remove the oxygen, which is only a small part of the atmosphere. The second way to deal with the oxygen is with a vacuum sealer. It gets out all of the air, oxygen and everything else. I have noticed that some YouTube channels talk about using the vacuum sealer and these as well. And you can. For me, I use one or the other. If the seal breaks to release the vacuum, it's going to use up the oxygen absorber as well. Another enemy of food in long-term storage can be insects. If you've dealt with rice and wheat and so forth and corn, probably at some point in time you have had insects that got into that stuff. Well, those insects were probably already there when you got it. So, different ways to deal with that. A lot of people say put your rice or your whatever in the freezer for 2 days or 5 days or some number of days. That's probably a good idea. However, for us, we just simply put it out of the bag, into the container, remove the oxygen, and I do believe that that will prevent any insects from growing inside the stuff. But if you want to put yours in the freezer, that's okay. You just got to be sure that when you get it out, you deal properly with the moisture, because you don't want to seal up something that you kill the insects, but you got moisture now in your food. End result won't be good. And the last enemy of your food in storage, it's going to be rodents. There's nothing that we do in particular with the packaging of the food. The rodent protection comes from the overall or the bigger containers and or the area that you store your food in. And the last major thing that can affect your food in storage, which we can't control with just the packaging, is temperature. The warmer the temperature, the shorter the shelf life. The colder the temperature, the longer the shelf life. So to be realistic, most of us are going to keep things stored at room temperature or slightly less or slightly above room temperature. And that's the best most of us can do. So what we're trying to accomplish with repackaging and storing food long term is to get rid of the moisture, keep out the light, keep the insects away, keep the rodents away, store it at a good temperature, and get the oxygen out. If we can accomplish that, we can keep our food long term. So our rice, we got a 1 pound bag a 2-pound bag, a 5-pound bag, and a 50-pound bag. The containers that we're going to use: 5-gallon bucket, mason jar, a 1-gallon plastic jug, a 2-liter plastic jug, and a 16-ounce plastic jug. We're also going to use Mylar bags, large and small, vacuum sealer bags, and the equipment we're going to use is a vacuum sealer from Food Saver for vacuum packaging, heat sealer to seal the Mylar bags, and oxygen absorbers. So let's repackage the rice for long-term storage. When I first got into preparedness, all the rage was 50-pound bags, 5-gallon buckets, and 5-gallon or 6-gallon Mylar bags. And I did some repackaging that way, and we're going to do that here, but this way is not my favorite way anymore. It's still a very good way to do it, and as we go through the video, I'll explain why that's no longer my favorite way. If you're going to deal with 5-gallon buckets very much, you're going to need a bucket opening tool. So this is our 5-gallon bucket in a 6-gallon Mylar bag. I'll have to weigh it again, but there's about 32 pounds of rice now in the bag and bucket. Now the rice is about right here on the bucket and in the bag, so I don't want to deal with this much excess bag on it, so I'm going to trim the bag about 4 inches or so. That'll make it easier on me to try to squeeze the air out and then to seal it. So the next thing is to get the right oxygen absorber into the bag of rice. Most of these absorbers come in multi-packs, and sometimes you don't use all of them at one time, so you need a way to store them. I store them in a mason jar that I've vacuum sealed. And I do not remember now, these are 1000 cc or 2000 cc absorbers. So for a 5-gallon bucket, typically you need at least 2000 cc, so I'm going to put 2 of these in the bucket, and if I got too much, that's better than not having enough. Two. Jar is sealed. Absorbers in the bag. Now let's seal the bag up. All right, I left just a little bit. I'm going to try to squeeze as much air out of that as I can. Ouch, that's hot. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this, but I haven't found it. And this is part of the reason why I don't like this, or why this isn't my favorite method anymore. So I have it sealed everywhere. I am going to do one more right here because I just don't like the way that one looks. Okay, that is done. Next thing we're going to do is basically the same thing, but on a smaller scale. And next is another oxygen absorber, which I'm going to put one from the same jar because I don't want to open a pack of a slightly smaller set of oxygen absorbers. Remember, a little more than you need is better than not having enough. I'm going to use one of these. This is larger than that bag needs. A bag that size would need about 500 cc absorber. These are at least 1000, might be 2000. One into the bag. So we're going to do the same process with this one as we did the big one, but this one's a little easier. Squeeze as much of the air out of it as I can, and that's about it. Make sure the seal overlaps, and I hold it for close to 10 seconds. I don't know that I have to, but that's what I do. All right, this time we got a 2-pound bag of rice in an 8 by 11, I think it is, food saver bag. No oxygen absorber. All right, there it is. We're going to use the O2 absorbers in the 2 liter, in the 16 ouncer, in one of the jars. If you guys are going to buy some O2 absorbers, I would suggest that you get a mid-size absorber, so you can just put one in your smaller containers, and if you need to put O2 in a 5-gallon bucket, just put 3 or 4 or 5 of those mid-sized absorbers in the bucket. Stick with one size that will work for all your different size containers. We'll put a little more rice in that one. That one is okay as is. Done. And this one might be a little difficult, but nope. I'll put a little more rice in that one, a little more in that one, and I'm going to seal this one, and then we'll be right back. Those 3 are done. Now let's do the last vacuum sealing, and then they'll all be done. Pretty heavy, there's 2 pounds of rice in it, and I'm not sure how much the jar weighs. So how will our repackaging stand up to the enemies of food storage? Let's check them all out. First, moisture. The rice was dry, the containers were dry, the bags were dry. Moisture is taken care of. They all passed the test. Second is light. One of the advantages of the bucket is it has a Mylar bag in it which keeps the light out, and the bucket keeps the light out. So light, check on the bucket, check on the Mylar bag. The others, they don't pass the light test. So they got to be put into another container to block the light out, or into a dark room to take care of the light. How about number 3, oxygen? We took the oxygen out of the ones that we vacuum sealed, that jar and that bag. We have O2 absorbers in those 3, that one, and the bucket. And this bag is already starting to, since I put such a large absorber in the bag, much larger than needed, it's already sucking, looks like, all of the air out of it. By tomorrow morning, I expect that to be really, really hard. Don't forget, I'll take a picture or a short clip of this bag in the morning to include in the video so you can see what the O2 absorbers do. So the oxygen is taken care of in various ways in various containers. Okay, insects. If there's insects in the rice or insect eggs, we have or will have taken the oxygen away. I do not anticipate that they will hatch and live. Maybe they will. I haven't had that experience when I've properly stored and sealed various types of food. We do have several buckets and Mylar bags that we've had sealed up for nearly 10 years that I'm going to show you guys in a video in a month or two. I'm not sure exactly when. So, and we'll compare the 10-year-old stored food with new food. That's another video. So if you don't want to miss that, you know the routine, right? Right. Insects, I believe we've got that taken care of. Rodents, taken care of. Depends on what the rodent is. So some of the smaller containers, not the glass, but the others, they need to be stored in a rodent-proof container or a rodent-free area. The temperature that you store them at is nothing to do with the repackaging. Remember, the hotter the temperature, the shorter the storage life. The cooler the temperature, the longer the storage life. So whichever way you choose, vacuum sealing, O2 absorbers, Whether you choose large containers, buckets, Mylar bags, plastic containers, glass containers, you got to make sure you take care of the enemies of your food. We went over those, so we won't do that again. So which way is easier? Well, it really depends upon whether you got this or you got that or you got the other thing. And at the beginning of the video, I told you that I would tell you guys my favorite method of long-term storage. It used to be the 5-gallon buckets. You saw me struggling with that in the video, and I've always struggled that very same way. So now, my favorite way is, I like this, storing it in the vacuum sealer bags, because this lets me store 1 pound bags at a time, or 2 pounds. This is a 2-pound bag. Or I can get a 5-pound bag and make larger bags with a roll of vacuum sealing bags. Of course, I got to put these in another container. That's okay. This lets me store my stuff, whether it's rice, beans, or whatever it is, in smaller containers. I can get a pound this week, a pound next week, store it, because I do have the vacuum sealing machine. But you could also store it pound at a time this way too, if you wanted to. But for me, this is my favorite way. This is my second favorite way. Vacuum sealing in jars. So my question for you guys for this video, what is your favorite way to repackage rice or beans or any similar type foods? Is it one of these methods? Do you have another method? Dry canning perhaps? What's your favorite method of repackaging food? Let us hear from you in the comments below. All of these items that you've seen here in the video, we do have links to those if you're interested in them. That's in the description box. There's also a link down there to our Amazon store. We'd like to invite you to go check out our Amazon store. We think it's much better than it was a couple months ago. And if you visit it, then leave us a comment about if you think it needs to be improved. Tell us so, and tell us what you'd like to see as an improvement. If storing food like this seems to be a bit overwhelming or a lot more work than you want to do, then watch this video where I talk about the easiest storage method of all for long-term storage of food.